do his little spiel. But first, thanks for joining, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Kier. I host this Like-Minded Investors Meetup, usually every third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Unfortunately, our original speaker we had for tomorrow night wasn't able to make it. So Austin said if we held it tonight, he'd be able to, share his story. So if you want, put in the channel or in the chat your social media handle, website, whatever you want to do to connect with each other. That's kind of why we do these meetups, to learn and network and help each other out. So like I said, tonight's guest is Austin. He is at Rentals to Retirement on Instagram. And he'll be chatting, like I said, about a variety of things. So I'm going to let him get started. And like I said, it's a small group tonight. So if you guys want to either put your questions in the chat, I can read them off to Austin, or absolutely feel free to unmute yourself, since a small group, we might not get this chance again. So Austin, you can get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I see some familiar faces, so that's fun. Thanks for jumping in. And I'm going to attempt to share my story, answer any questions I can. And if I don't have the answer, Kier has all the answers. So you guys are in good hands with that. My wife and I got started in real estate investing in 2019. And so 2019 rolled around. My wife was about to give birth to our third son. I have three boys that are 7, 4, and 2. And so she was about to give birth to our third boy. And we figured, like every other family, we'd go and buy a house because we need more space. And so we applied for a mortgage and we were denied. We were told we couldn't buy a house. We couldn't qualify for a loan. And if you're a husband on this call, you know the disappointment that I probably felt in that moment. As a parent, if you're a parent on this call, you know the struggle of feeling like, man, I can't provide for my family like I want to. And so I was upset, and I allowed myself to kind of wallow for a minute because I'm super active. And so I just kept moving right along. But I Google searched, and I found that in 2019, there was actually 11% of all mortgage applications were denied. That's 1.6 million families were told that they couldn't buy a home. And so my wife and I are now on a mission to help 1,000 home renters become homeowners over the next 25 years. We do rent to own and lease options. And we just placed our third family in their home that they own now in Clarksville, Tennessee. So we're 3 families in. We've got 997 left to go. I don't know how we're going to do that, but we're committed to the mission. We believe in investing in things that change people's lives. And so it's not just the fact that I get passive income and we get set up for retirement. It's the fact that I get to help another family who is in our position be proud of where they live and call this place their own. And so I got started wholesaling in Cleveland, Ohio. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I was wholesaling in Cleveland. I learned how to analyze deals. I learned how to talk to sellers. I learned the paperwork involved with the sale. I learned how to estimate rehabs. I learned a lot of different things, how to analyze a market, all through wholesaling. And finally, a deal came up in a market that I was looking at, which was Clarksville, Tennessee. And that was our first home that we purchased, seller financed. And we were able to place a family. His name's Jamario, is the dad, his wife, and their 3-year-old daughter. And after that first one, I'll tell you, after you get your first deal, the momentum that you feel is it's immeasurable. And so it just kept us moving. We were able to buy a 10-door portfolio, 8 single-family homes and 2 duplexes. 6 single-family homes and 2 duplexes. That was our next purchase in Ohio. And we're currently transitioning those single-family homes into rent to own. And then most recently, we closed on another single-family home in Clarksville, Tennessee, with a partner. And we just placed that family at the end of May. So they're in their home. I'm going to talk very briefly about kind of the details of those deals to let you in on how we approach this business. And then I want to open it to any questions that you guys have, whether it's out of state investing, how to market to sellers so that you can skip lenders and agents, which is my preferred method, and how to place a tenant, how to work on teams, how to build systems, and all that. So the first deal that we had in Clarksville, Tennessee, seller financed. The purchase price was $130,000. The cash at close was $16,000. We have it on a 5-year term with 3.25%. Now, if you recently closed on a mortgage, you'll know that 3.25% is pretty good without having to use a bank and to submit W-2s and qualify for that loan. So we were able to work out a really good deal there. Our total mortgage on that house is $600.24 a month. And we were able to turn this around and do a rent to own for $1,250 a month. And so our cash flow after everything is spoken for is $649.76 a month. Rent to own and lease options are fun because you defer all maintenance and repairs to the tenant. So we don't have to account for CapEx, property management. There's nothing to manage other than making sure they pay. Maintenance, repairs, and all of that is covered by the tenant. That was our first deal. That's a unicorn deal. Not all deals are as great as that. Our most recent deal in Clarksville is a sub 2, which is subject to the existing mortgage, which essentially means that we've kept the debt or the loan in the seller's name, and they've deeded over the title to us. So now we control the property without having the debt attached to our name. And so that one we purchased for $118,000. Cash at close was $2,000 to the seller. So that's all it cost us to get into it. Our total mortgage is $722 a month. And we've turned around and did a rent to own for $1,250. So that's what, 5.25, like $528 a month on that. And again, no need for CapEx, maintenance, repairs, because all of that's deferred to the seller. And then our portfolio in Ohio is seller financed again. Cash at close was $22,000, which went to the seller. Our interest rate is high. It's 7%, and it's a 5-year term. So 7%, we are still able to cash flow. Oh gosh, this is why I need my wife with me to tell me all the numbers. We're still able to cash flow. I believe it's $1,200 after everything is paid for. So to the seller, and then we also borrowed private money to get into the deal. So after the seller's paid and after the private lender is paid, we net just about $1,200. I say that and I go through the deals to let you know that in all of this, I've never once had to ask a bank to help me. I prefer not to ask a bank to ever have to help me. It's very petty, but my thinking is if the bank wasn't going to help me, then I'm going to stick it to them by not using them at all. And I'm going to go around them completely. I'm going to help buyers not have to go through that pain of rejection. One thing that's unique about our business is that we do require tenant buyers to enroll in a credit repair program. And so I have a credit repair program that I work personally with, and it's written in the contract. They have to enroll in this program because the reality is I want them to buy this house. And the only way they're going to be able to buy this house is if they improve their credit. So that's one of the contingencies on my end, is that they have to be a part of the credit repair program. I would love to pause because I feel like I've been talking too long, and ask if you guys have any questions, or hear if there's any questions in the chat, if you can read them.
Yes, there is one. It's from Mo, and it says, you have an amazing story, Austin. How do you propose/negotiate seller financing with the seller?
How do I negotiate seller financing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how would I answer that? A common question I get is how do you find seller financing in sub 2 deals, which I think is kind of to what they're asking. And I would say this: you can never find the deals because they're really uncovered by asking questions about what the seller's needs are. And so the way that I would approach it, a couple of things is I try to leverage as many free resources as possible. And so I'll go on something like Zillow or Redfin, and I'll look for sale by owners. And I'll just call them and I'll ask questions. And sometimes a creative deal isn't what works for them. And so I'm okay with that. I would say 9 out of the 10 people that I talk to, a creative deal wouldn't be beneficial for them. And that's okay. But some of the things, indicators that a creative deal would be beneficial are things like little to no equity in the house, but they're behind on payments. And so the issue there would be, since there's such little equity, if they were to list it, their profits would be eaten up by realtor commissions. The realtor would say that, you know, you have X, Y, and Z to repair before we list it. And maybe the seller doesn't have the money to do that. And so what you're doing is you're helping them because what's next, if they can't make the payments, is foreclosure. And so you're helping them get out of the situation where their credit could be messed up for 7 years. Their whole financial world could go upside down if they keep going without making these payments. And so these are some of the indicators that a creative deal would work. Another indicator is someone owns a house outright, and maybe they got into real estate because they thought they wanted to be a landlord. And then they realized how fun it is to deal with crazy tenants. And they realized, you know, this isn't the life for me. And so maybe if they own the house outright, you're able to provide for them passive cash flow, like they thought their real estate investment was going to be, without having to be a landlord. And so it would be, you know, I see, let me see who's on here. I just like using real names. I'm sorry. I see someone named Joe. So it'd be something like this. Hey, Joe, thanks for taking this call. Just calling to see, you know, what's going on with the house? Why are you needing to sell? Right. And these are open-ended questions. I never ask closed-ended questions because you can answer with a yes, no, and then move on. So what's going on with the house? And at that time, the seller will give you indicators of their motivation. And so the way that I phrase it is, all right, Joe, hey, I heard everything you said. Here's what I think might work. I can offer you cash. This would be my price. And I usually shoot with the 70% of ARV minus repairs because I want to be safe on my end. Or Joe, if what you want is cash flow monthly without the responsibility of being a tenant, I can also do that for you. How does that sound? And so now Joe's like, well, I get my cash flow. I don't have to be a landlord. I don't have to track people down for payments. I don't have to worry about repairs and maintenance and CapEx. And I can sit on my couch on my lazy boy recliner, drinking a Coors Light, and I get monthly cash in my bank account. Now, in my mind, I think that's a killer deal, but for some people that won't work. But that's how I phrase it. And that's kind of how I frame it. You can go after, how would I say it? You can go after creative deals, but I've never found that to work. I've never found it to work to push for a creative deal. I take them as they come, and I just kind of frame it in a way that, you know, it makes sense for people. Now, if you are going to make a pitch for a creative deal, here's my number one tip I can give you. Don't use real estate investor jargon. Nobody cares that you know what a sub 2 is. The homeowner has no idea what sub 2 means. The homeowner has no idea what seller carry means. And so this isn't the place to flex your knowledge and how you know all of these vocabulary terms. Nobody cares. You frame it in a way that the seller can understand and where the seller sees the benefit. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
I loved it. It was detailed, and I think you went into a couple other things there too that made a lot of sense. So from Neil, I believe, I love this strategy, Austin. How do you market for lease to own? Do you list it on MLS? And how long does it take you to place a tenant buyer usually? I would imagine it would take a bit longer than a typical renter, but maybe wrong.
Yeah, so those are great questions. My number one tool to place families is Facebook Marketplace. There is no other platform that has as big of a reach as Facebook. TikTok is growing. That's becoming a popular popular platform, but it's popular with like teenagers who aren't really going to buy homes. But Facebook is more popular for an age group of anywhere from 35 to 44, which is kind of the median age group. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for families. I'm not looking for teenagers. I'm not looking for cool social media influencers. I'm looking for your everyday family who just needs a place to stay. Now, our average is, I think our first one took us, I think, 2 months to place the tenant because we had no idea what we were doing. Our most recent one was 2 weeks. And so we listed on Facebook Marketplace like any other rental listing, but we do specify whether it's a rent to own or a lease option. And those are two different types of transactions, although they're used interchangeably. And we do, pictures, we do videos. Here's the funny thing. My person who does the pictures and video in Clarksville, Tennessee is actually one of my tenants. I just ask him and he does, and it's great because it's free and I don't have to pay him. I did give him a discount on his rent this last month for doing it for me. But you post it like any other listing. Now, I haven't posted anything on the MLS because I know Facebook. I use it every day, and I know that the everyday family uses Facebook just like I do. And so that's the family that, that's my target demographic. In everything you do in real estate, you always think of, who's my target demographic? Who are they? What's their problem? And where can I find them? And so the same thing for a tenant buyer. What's the ideal family? What's the problem they're facing? And then where can you find them? And realistically, there are a lot of families out there who have money to move into a house, who have great jobs, but maybe made a financial mistake in the last few years that ruined their credit. There's a lot more than you would
realize. So Kelly says, such great cash flow. Is your overall goal to have ongoing cash flow and helping people be homeowners and not any long-term holds?
Great question. So single family homes is 100% rent to own lease option. I want these people to buy their homes. As far as cash flow, we do own 2 duplexes, which we haven't decided if we're going to try to do something like a house hack lease option for a family where they basically would buy it like they would through a traditional lender, but they use us instead. And then we do have goals. The end of this year, we want to have, 1 short-term rental, which would be more of passive income, and then apartment complex in spring of 2022. Yes, Jake, I need to get in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg. We need to be in the Smokies together.
Let's do it, brother.
Yes, I was looking last night, as I do every night. And short-term rentals.
It's crushing it, man. Yeah, it's crushing it. I love ours. Like, we got a heck of a deal, man. Like 3.5 months, I've gotten 100K in equity already.
That's so annoying.
It's crazy. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Okay.
A question that Neil has. Can you explain the difference between the rent to own and lease options?
Yeah. So a lease option will typically require an option fee, not a deposit, a non-refundable option fee. And what that option fee does is reserves, I want to say it as simply as possible. It reserves your right to purchase the home within the time span that you and, if you're the tenant buyer, that you and I agree to. So let's say our lease option agreement is for 2 years, and I require a 10% option fee that's non-refundable in exchange for you working with me and not having to go through a lender, and also in exchange for me holding onto the home until you can purchase it at the end of the 2 years. You pay upfront whatever that option fee is. At the end of that term, you have the option to exercise your ability to purchase the home, which means you would have to qualify at that point with a traditional lender or come up with the cash to purchase the home. If you fail to be able to exercise that option, we have a couple of options. We can either extend it for another year, then it turns into a 3-year term, or, and this is what I don't want to happen, or we politely ask you to move out and we find another family to move in. Rent to own is going to be completely different in the sense that I look at rent to own like layaway, except you get to own the piece of property and you're just making payments on it until you have 100% equity in the house.
That makes sense. Does
Hopefully
anybody?
that was clear.
Yeah, I like how you simplified it. Does anyone have any other questions? There's nothing else in the chat. I have a couple, but it's going to change the direction of it a little bit. So if anyone has questions on what he was just talking about, feel free to mute yourselves too. Like we have a small group tonight. Do you have a prepayment penalty in your contract if the rent to own tenant wants to purchase the property before the year ends?
Nope, not at all. I want them to buy the home.
And does rent to own also have a term limit?
It can and it can't. Here's the fun thing about creative, I would even call rent to own and lease options creative strategies. Outside of what's legal and what's required by any governing board, there are no rules. And you create the terms with the tenant buyer if you're the one that's doing the lease option or rent to own, or you create the terms with the seller if you're purchasing it, seller financed or sub to. And so this is where you really get to be creative and help families. The first home that we did the rent to own or the lease option on in Clarksville, Tennessee, we required 10% down. Our end purchase price was $185, and so our option fee was $18,500. Now the tenant buyer wanted to move in but didn't have $18,500, and so that's fine. What we were able to do was say, hey, we're going to split that up into 3 payments over 18 months. And so we still get our cash, but we're able to work with this person. And that's what I love about doing these kinds of transactions is you're really meeting the needs of people. And in my mind, for my wife,
Uh-oh, I think we lost him. I'm sure he'll hop back on here. Does anybody have an?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. I was going to say, I was about to ask everyone else a question. Yes, we can hear you.
I am here. So yeah, the gist of it is this is a great way to be able to serve people and to meet their needs without being tied to, whatever lending regulations Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac might have.
What else do we have here? Oh, how do you structure your rent to own?
The number one thing I do is I call my real estate attorney and ask him to structure it. Like, that's probably the best advice I could give you is I call my attorney. I say, hey, Tony, here's the property. Here are the numbers. Here's the tenant buyer. There you go. And he does all the work. I know what I am and I know what I'm not. I'm not an attorney and I am not good at structuring agreements and contracts. And so I'm just not going to. I let the professionals be the professionals and I'll do what I'm good at. So that wasn't really an answer, but it was. And honestly, that'd be my advice for any contract or agreement that you use. Pay for what it costs to consult with a real estate attorney. It's going to save you a lot more than if you do something yourself and it turns out the wrong way. And so I consult my attorney every single transaction.
Love it. It's all about putting what's that saying? Putting the right butts in the right seats.
Yep, that's right.
So do you have to be a licensed realtor or is this state specific?
What is the question in reference to?
Colleen, do you want to unmute yourself if you can?
Yeah, Colleen, can you?
Oh, I think we lost her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
There we go. Hey, Colleen.
Hi. In regards to advertising rentals, do you have to be a licensed realtor?
No, it's like you would list a for sale by owner, right? An owner, a person who owns a home, if they want to list it for sale by owner, they can list it by themselves. In the same way that I can go on Craigslist and find a house listed for rent by an owner.
Okay.
At least the states that I'm doing business in. I don't know if there's any differences in any other states. I'm specifically in Tennessee and Ohio, and we're working on stuff in North Carolina, and I haven't heard anything like that in those states.
Did that answer your question, Colleen?
It did.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Is there any option deposit with rent to own? Still a bit hazy on the difference between the two.
So there's not an option fee in the sense of the lease option, like a non-refundable option fee that reserves your. There could be a deposit, which would be like a first and last month's rent structured that way. But as far as a non-refundable deposit, there shouldn't be.
Okay. What is your vetting process or interview process for potential tenants?
Yep. So 2.5 times the rent as far as gross income. And a lot of places do 3 times. We've realized that 3 times in the markets that we're in is unreasonable. And so 2.5 is where we are. Outside of that, a 580 minimum credit score. The reason being because we know that someone can lift their credit score from 580 to 620 in a matter of 2 years. And if you want to buy the house, you have to be able to qualify with the 620 for most lenders. And so our minimum credit score is 580. We do, a background check, eviction report, and all of that. We use the software avail.co that runs all of those screenings. But outside of that, I mean, just the 2.5 times monthly income, 580 minimum score. And then once they fill out the application, avail.co will run them through all of the screening that they do. And then we get all of that back. That's the credit report, background check, any criminal history and eviction reports.
So I think, Emma, he kind of answered this question, but you mentioned this process without a realtor. How do you go about structuring your contracts the right way without a realtor?
You ask your real estate attorney. If you do not want to consult the real estate attorney, you ask a title company. But I prefer to consult my real estate attorney.
Which actually leads perfectly into the next question. Is your attorney in the same state you're doing the deal in?
Yes. So my Tennessee deals, I have one real estate attorney in that state because they're aware of all of the regulations specific to that state. And then in Ohio, we have a separate real estate attorney that we pay. And then we also have a real estate attorney because I live in California and we're working on some stuff out here as well.
How are you finding your homes? Through a cold caller?
So I used to text blast because I used to wholesale a lot. But now what I've decided is that my time is best spent on other things, not deal finding. And so I rely on a couple of trusted wholesalers who know what I'm looking for and they know how to work creative terms with sellers. I just rely on them, honestly. I don't do any more cold calling. I used to, but I've got 3 kids. I can't be stuck on the phone all day. I've got a full-time job. There's no way my boss would be happy with that. And so I just rely on the people who are good at what they do. And then I pay whatever premium needs to be paid.
Makes sense. If there's no fee, this is a good question. If there is no fee in rent to own, how do you make your money on such a deal?
let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So without the non-refundable option fee up front, you're asking how do we make money on a rent to own, correct?
That's what it
Yep.
sounds
So
like. Yeah.
yep, two things. The first thing is that we set a purchase price higher than what we paid for it. So they're not going to be paying into the equity that or into the price that we bought it for. We're going to take into account appreciation year over year based on how long of a term, ideally that we can structure. Outside of that, there is the simple thing of arbitrage. So it's just like you would do a regular rental. You have a mortgage payment and you just make sure that you rent it for more than the mortgage payment.
Yeah. And then since you don't have, you pass on the maintenance and all that stuff to them, you don't have to worry about those CapEx and maintenance and I guess even vacancy, right? Yeah.
Exactly. The hope is that they stay and that they buy it. So we don't want to have to account for vacancy.
Yeah, that makes sense. You actually answered, I had that same question about whether or not you increased the purchase price to account for appreciation. So it sounds like you do that, which makes sense. Do you manage the rental payments or outsource?
So really, if you're talking about managing rental payments, if you use a software like I use Avail, all of that's involved is checking to make sure they paid. So outside of that, there's nothing really to do. And that's as much of property management as we need with the way that we structure the deals.
So what kind of, so you use Avail, do you have any other like systems or processes that you have in place for, because you seem so busy with 3 kids and you have a full-time job, which I didn't know. I just found that out. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm actually, here's what's funny. I'm, as we're on this call, I'm at someone's house because we're going to drive to a bachelor party that we're doing on a Wednesday night at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time because we're getting older and we have kids. This is what happens. But as far as systems and things set in place, I do use Asana. And so I have step-by-step how to take a deal from the lead to actual acquisition, and then to marketing it for a tenant, and then actually placing the tenant. So that's all in Asana. I have rental calculators and spreadsheets to analyze deals. And really outside of that, that's all we use. We don't use much. What I've learned is that as long as you can dial in the system, it's scalable and it applies to any market.
So I guess back to the rent to own, does the full rent amount go towards their principal or how much does?
So the way we do it for rent to own, everything goes towards the purchase price of the home.
How much do you pay the wholesalers per deal they send? Also, are they sending you a warm lead that's curious about seller financing, or are they negotiating and agreeing on terms with the seller and then passing that on to you?
Let me look at that one so I can make sure I answer it the right way. How much do I pay the wholesalers? Oh, got it. So honestly, I pay whatever makes sense. I don't have a set amount that I will pay a wholesaler or I won't. The most I've paid a wholesaler so far is $16,000 on one house because the number still made sense. So I don't have a specific number I try to stay under. It's just if the numbers make sense with the deal, then you do it no matter what. Let me make sure I answer the second question. Okay. So the way that it works with the wholesalers that I work with is they've already signed the purchase and sale agreement for this creative strategy and these terms, and then they're assigning that to me. So I'm not working out creative terms with the seller. I'm just purchasing the contract that already has all the creative terms in it.
So on that note, actually, I have a question. Were you the one that trained these wholesalers, or did you find wholesalers that knew creative financing? How did that work?
Yeah, I lucked out and just found wholesalers that were good at what they do when it comes to creative terms. Like I said, time is important to me. I don't have time to train wholesalers. I don't have time to find leads. I just don't. And so I rely on a couple of people I trust who I've seen have proof of concept, and they're worth their money. And so I'll pay them whatever it needs to be paid.
So essentially it's like you have a great team. That's almost what it comes down to. Okay.
Exactly. And so that's one of the things that I love about what I'm able to do is that I don't have to have these guys on my team. You have to build a core four in order to invest that. You just got to know the right people.
Yep. Okay, this is a good one. Take us from the time you purchase the contract from the wholesaler. Do you then purchase the house, then find tenants and prepare an agreement for rent to own?
Say that one more time.
So it says, take us from the time you purchase the contract from the wholesaler. Do you then purchase the house, then find tenants and prepare an agreement for rent to own?
Yes. So let me try it this way. So once I get the contract from the wholesaler, I'm signing that assignment contract to say that I'm then purchasing the home based on those terms. So I'm the legal owner of that property in that moment. Once I own the property and the deal is closed, then I go out and I structure the deal with my attorney and find the tenant buyer. Did I answer that?
I think, let's see who asked that.
I just want to make sure.
A.Nat. I'm not sure which
They said
name
yes.
to use there. Okay. I missed that. Mo, that's really cool that you get wholesalers to do part of it for you. That's better than hiring VAs.
Yep, exactly. I don't have to, yeah, and I'm not paying them to cold call. I'm just paying them for their actual deals that they find.
Yep. So Colleen said never knew wholesalers would do this. Why wouldn't they keep them?
Because they're really nice and they want to send them all to me. I honestly don't know. There's a lot of deals that I've told wholesalers that they should hang on to, and they still decided to assign them. So I have no idea.
I mean, I'll give a feedback on that. A lot just don't fit the box. So like I just sent Austin a deal because he's looking for a rental property down here in the Joshua Tree South SoCal area. And I'm not looking for those properties. So, that's how it works. Sometimes it just doesn't fit the box and it fits somebody else's perfectly. And, you're able to give them a bounce pass and help them out.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for jumping in.
Yep. And some of the things are, when Will says the box, sometimes the box is to build quick capital, and it's not necessarily to hold long-term rentals. And so some of these wholesalers are just with that. So in those moments, they'll assign it to someone like me who will take it down creatively.
Yep. So how did you, you mentioned private money earlier. How did you find your team and how did you find private money? Is it like everybody always says, and it's just tell everybody and anybody what you're doing and those things fall into place? Or did you do something specific to build your team?
It is kind of what you just said. So a lot of people will look at private money and they'll go to Google and they'll search for an organization or a corporation that labels themselves as a private lender. What I've heard from someone long ago, and I still believe, is that private lenders are called private because they're not on Google. You can't find them there. Private lenders, the way that I use private money, are old coworkers. They are family and friends. They're old bosses. They're people I've met at the gym that I work out alongside. They are parents of my son's classmates. They are local business owners. They're basically people that know you, that like you, and trust you already. right? So if I were to go to a lender, I have to prove that they should trust me. I have to submit W-2s. I have to go through a credit check. I have to do all of these things. The way that I use private money and the way I approach private lenders is if you just find people who know you, like you, and trust you, you can skip all of that. So what I did, kind of step one, is I went through all of my contacts and I wrote down every name of someone who could be a potential lender. I went through my phone first, went through all my contacts. Then I went through my Facebook friends, went through all my contacts. Then I went through Instagram, went through all my contacts. At the end of that, I had 64 names of people who could be potential lenders. Of those 64, I didn't contact them. What I did was I made a post on my personal Facebook page that said, this is what my wife and I are doing. If you want to learn more about it in real estate or you've been interested, here's a Zoom call you can jump on. We hosted that Zoom call. There were 14 people. I had a slide deck, a free slide deck from Canva, which turns your ordinary person into a graphic designer instantly. So go on Canva. So I did the slide deck. It was a short intro about our vision, about the 1,000 home renters to homeowners over 25 years. It was a case study with our first home. And then at the very end, I told everyone on the call that there's two ways that you can get involved in real estate. You can get involved actively or you can get involved passively. And then what I did was I broke down the ideal person who would fit for active investing. And so this was, has a ton of time, has 40 hours a week to commit to this, has access to capital, which honestly doesn't describe anyone in today's world because everyone's super busy. On the passive side, I listed has a full-time job, doesn't have much time, has access to capital. Now everyone's looking at that column and they're like, oh yeah, that's me. That fits me. And so I left it there and I just said I was going to follow up with everyone. After the call ended, within 48 hours, I followed up with every single person. Remember, it's only 14 of them. And all I said was, hey, that was my first time ever doing that call. Would you give me some feedback? Now, I wasn't asking them to be a lender. I was just asking them how they thought I did. But I was able to get 2 people out of those 14 to say, that was really interesting. And I think I want to do the passive investor thing that you talked about. From there, we talked terms and numbers, the amount that they were going to loan me, the length of the term, what percentage made sense for them. And then, like I said, maybe 12 times so far already, I called my real estate attorney and I said, here are the terms of what we want to do. I got the lender on the call with me and the attorney so that they could ask any questions they needed to with me present, just to add a sense of security. And then we signed the agreement. And it's an unsecured promissory note, which is essentially saying I owe you. It's not secured by any real estate or any collateral. And this is all possible because it's someone who knows me, likes me, and trusts me.
That is incredible. And I think Nat, if you have any other questions in regards to that, Nat put a question in there, but I'm pretty sure you just answered it. So if he didn't, let me know. What else is on here? Mo, do you ever work with realtors to buy their old or dead leads through seller financing?
So I just started trying this. I'm only 2 weeks into contacting realtors and asking about, expired listings, homes that don't qualify for traditional lending that they had. And I haven't had any success yet, so I can't really speak on that. From my experience so far, it seems like the realtors that I've contacted have already been contacted by investors, and they just weren't professional and left a bad taste in the mouth. And so it looks like it's going to be an uphill battle for me.
Yeah. Well, it's only 2 weeks. You're only 2 weeks in.
Right. There's a lot of realtors I can still call.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not looking too bright right now.
Well, keep at it. I mean, you'll get, I'm sure, especially the expireds, they're already motivated to sell, so it's just a matter of, let's see if they would do seller financing. I guess, does anyone else have any other questions? We're getting towards the end of the night and the chat has run out of questions. So either unmute yourself or put them in the chat. Oh, there is one more. Colleen, did you source tenants before you landed your first property? Do you have them complete their criteria and find to suit them, or do you just advertise what you have available?
Yeah. In case they're looking in the market, but I don't go searching home to fit a buyer because that's an added job on my end. I just find the home and then list it that way. Here's another quick, I forgot to add this into the screening process that we talked about. So I specifically market on Facebook because once they respond, I'm able to look at their Facebook profile. And you can learn a lot about someone based on their Facebook profile. We had one guy respond, and his profile picture was him carrying what looked to be like an illegal firearm with some words that were very, it was very hateful words on his t-shirt. And I was able to then make a sound decision and say that we're going to pass and move on to the next candidate. So that's part of why we use Facebook, because we're able to access their Facebook profile and kind of get an idea of who they are and potentially who they could be as a tenant.
Hey, Austin. I had a couple questions. So my first question was going to be, what tools or books did you use? Because I know you said you started researching online once you were able to get the mortgage, but what tools or books did you use to learn more about rent to own and kind of the methods that you use? I'll start there. That'll be the first question. I'll ask the second question afterwards.
Yeah, those are great questions. Here's the way I look at it. It's 2021. Anything you need to learn is out there. It's out there on Google. It's out there on YouTube. It's out there in Facebook groups. And so here's some super practical things you can do today. Facebook groups is probably number one if you have a Facebook profile. Just searching groups. There's a group, Creative Financing. It's Pace Morby. He has a great group, a lot of information and content there. You can also look for his YouTube channel, which has some great videos. I don't see them, but Joe and Jen, who are usually around this crew, are great resources as well. And then I didn't read too many books. Something that's shocking is I haven't even read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm a real estate investor. I know that's like toxic. Like I shouldn't even be allowed to be on this call because I haven't read the book. But I haven't read many books about creative financing. Pace Morby, I think, has the most content out right now. There's also on YouTube the channel Investor Mel and Dave. They're a couple from Canada, but they were very helpful. And then I'm trying to think. Oh gosh, what's his name? Sean Terry. Sean Terry is extremely helpful on creative financing. Jerry Norton has some content on YouTube that's good for creative financing. I think that's the end of my list, honestly. And then the rest of it came from me just calling people, whether title companies, real estate attorneys, realtors, property managers, and just asking about these different types of transactions. And so here's my practical tip that you can use today. Here's my script whenever I'm calling about things that I'm unsure of. Let's say let's go with a real estate attorney. So I would call the real estate attorney and I'd say, hi, my name is Austin. I live in California. I'm looking to invest in Tennessee doing creative financing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? That is literally my script every time I call someone to ask for help. If I message someone on Instagram who I see who's doing something that I want to do, it's the same thing. Hey, my name is Austin. I've been looking at your content. I have no idea how to do what you do, but I would love to learn. Can you help me? And it's as easy as that, just being completely humble. Don't misrepresent yourself as someone who's doing bigger things. I think the humility is what attracts people and kind of pushes people to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. My last question was going to just be, what led to your market decisions? Because you're based in two different markets that aren't where you live, and I completely understand the value of out-of-state investing. And so I'm just curious. I've heard different people say they use different values to determine the markets that they're going to be in, and I was curious, especially with the numbers with rent to own being different than long-term regular renting. How do you pick your markets?
So here's going to be the most or the least methodical way that I picked my markets. I searched top markets to invest in. I wrote a list of 5 markets that I liked, and all I said was the first deal that comes up in any one of these markets, I'm going for. The reason I chose those 5, here's the actual criteria. I never invest in a major metro market. And so I'm not going to invest in San Francisco. I'm not going to invest in Atlanta. I'm not going to invest in Nashville. I'm not going to invest in Boston. I look for a city that's 30 to 45-minute drive into the major metro markets. And the reason being is, so here in San Francisco, appreciation goes up. And the city that I live in, which is 40 minutes away from San Francisco, appreciation goes up there too. But what doesn't go up is the price tag. And so these markets outside of the major metro market benefit from the appreciation that they get without having the crazy price tags. And so number 1 has to be 30 to 45-minute drive into a major metro market. Number 2 has to have a minimum of 100,000 people, so population, a minimum, that just creates demand for homes to live in. Number 3 has to have 2 of the 3 job industries: military base, major hospital, and university. It doesn't have to have all 3. It have 2 of those 3. And that just secures the job industry. If you look at a city like Detroit that heavily relied on the auto industry, once they started outsourcing jobs to Mexico and Canada, the entire industry collapsed, and we saw the city's economy collapse with it. And because of that, a bunch of people moved out of Detroit. And so I try to look for job diversity as far as industry. The last thing is this, and this isn't really a criteria, more so than it is just a fun idea. I've got to want to visit the area. Like, I don't want to own properties in a state that I never want to go to. Like, I will never buy something in Nebraska. I'm sorry if you live in Nebraska. I'm sure it's a beautiful place. I just don't know that I would go there. But I would go to Nashville, and our properties are just outside of Nashville. And I would go to Canton, Ohio, because the NFL Hall of Fame thing is in Canton. So that's where we own our properties now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's one more plug. There's a YouTube series from Bigger Pockets. Steve Rosenberg, who is my real estate coach, did this walkthrough. I think the guy was from North Carolina, but he wanted to invest out of state. And Steve walks through the criteria that you should look at for every market, which includes job diversity, how many Fortune 500 companies are in that market, population growth, home ownership rates. That's a more methodical way of doing it. And so if you YouTube search Steve Rosenberg, out of state investing, I think that should bring it up. But it's like a 5-part series.
Yeah, that's really good. I've watched that. Okay, last couple questions. What program do you refer to the buyers to help them bring up their credit score?
So, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name now. My credit, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Whoever that is, send me a DM on Instagram and I'll send you their page. Oh my goodness, my credit something, but I'll hook you up.
Yeah, Kelly, DM him right now. Okay.
Yes, please, because I'll forget.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face when talking to owners about seller financing?
Education. That's probably the biggest roadblock, is having to learn how to educate them with terms that are simplified so that it makes sense. Outside of that, you can't really negotiate someone into a creative deal. It's just, it has to work for what their need is. And so as long as you educate them well, and you do it in a way that makes sense to them so they can understand it, then the rest is really up to them. That's like a non-answer, but that's as honest as I can be with that.
Do you talk with sellers directly, or have you shifted to only sourcing through wholesalers?
The first deal was specifically to the seller, or it was through the wholesaler, but I was able to jump on the phone with the seller to kind of clarify terms. The portfolio in Ohio, the wholesaler works directly with the seller. And so I negotiated with the wholesaler, who then went to the seller. And then the most recent one in Clarksville, Tennessee, that was already locked in. And so I just relied on the wholesaler.
Awesome. Well, I think that is it, unless anyone has a last minute burning question for Austin.
Austin, I have a question. I'm Melissa. Sorry, guys.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Sorry, here I am. Alrighty, hi. I've spoken to you on Instagram a couple of times and asked you some questions, so it's nice to be chatting with you. But I just wanted to ask a question. The market is really hot right now, and I'm working on purchasing my first rental property, and I'm getting closer and closer. However, I just want to know. I have heard before in Bigger Pockets, it's good to have a letter when you submit an offer, kind of just letting them know who you are, where you're kind of from, and what your, I guess you can say what your goal is to obtain the property. Is that something that you would recommend, or anyone else would recommend? Is that something you've done? Or I know you started months back, but I feel like now the market is wilder than it was a couple of months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, 6 months ago.
Yeah. So you're talking about like a cover letter?
Yeah, kind of
that you would send in with your offer.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is where I would be inexperienced here, because everything I did early on was direct to seller, and now it's directly to the wholesaler.
Yeah.
Usually what I've heard from other people is they would send the cover letter in with their offer through their agent. So if there's someone else who can answer that one, if I tried to answer it, it wouldn't be fair.
So I can answer that. I am a real estate agent, and I have buyers who I truly believe when they send a letter about themselves and their family and how they love the home and why they're buying it, I truly believe we won offers that way. I think it's a great thing.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Austin. Both of you guys.
I just had a quick question. So I follow another real estate agent who said, so I've done a letter before. It was not actually why we got the deal. I don't think it was mainly because we said that we would go for the appraisal, because that's what you do in this time sometimes if the deal still works. But the realtor that I follow said that there are concerns with doing that, because when you give information like that, then that becomes, what is it when you're buying a house and how you can't not sell to someone because they have a family or don't have a family, or because of what they look like. But a lot of times when you're doing those letters, you're giving that information away, which then impacts someone's decision. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, that is a valid point. And so, Kiara, I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that from a realtor's perspective.
I mean, I do hear what they're saying with that, but like, I don't want to put it this way, but off the top of my head, I don't know how to say it any better, but how are you going to be able to prove that that's the reason that they chose this person over somebody else? You know what I mean? Like, you're not inside their head. So if you're not comfortable doing it, then don't do it. But if you want properties, it seems to work.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Anything else, guys? All right. So next month is the meetup will be back to Thursdays. It'll be August 19th. And I don't know who we're going to have on yet. I'm going to probably try and get the person for tomorrow, but we'll see. Or that was supposed to be tomorrow. So if you haven't, I'm sure most of you already signed up unless you click the link in Like Minded Investors. But you can sign up and get email reminders for this every month. So Austin, thank you so much for joining and answering all these questions while driving in the car, and have fun at your, what is it? Bachelor party?
Yep, we're gonna about to turn up with smoothies.
Nice. All right.
Yeah,
So if you
thanks
guys,
everyone for listening, and I hope it was helpful. If you follow me on Instagram, I tell this to everyone, I answer every single message that comes in. And if I can help you, I will. If not, I'll find someone who can help you with whatever you're trying to do.
yeah, awesome. So if you aren't already following him, he's at rentals_2, the number 2 _ retirement. And then if you aren't already following at Like-Minded Investors, and then myself, I'm at realestate.kier. So I hope you all really enjoyed this. I know I did. And I hope you all will come next month, August 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you guys.
Bye.